Hi, Jacqueline. How are you doing?
I'm great, Manvir. Thanks for inviting me in for a conversation.
My pleasure. It's really my pleasure to have you on the show, Growth Mindset Conversations. So, let me welcome you formally. Welcome to my show, and it's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And let me introduce you to my audience. For more than 35 years, Jacqueline Wales has explored human behaviors and have asked tough questions to discover hard truths. She believes in the power of fearlessness to create the career and life you want. As a motivational speaker, professional coach, author of The Fearless Factor, and the Fearless Factor at Work, two books. Jacqueline has helped countless people become more empowered, confident, and resilient. And very interestingly, she's writing her next book now. Wow, Jacqueline, that's amazing.
Thank you. Something I really enjoy doing is writing and always have. So it's
Yeah,
great to be able to share the message with people.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I totally concur with your idea. So, as the show is called the Growth Mindset Conversations, so my first question to my guest always is, what is growth mindset for you?
Growth mindset for me involves learning a lot of lessons from failures, from life's experiences. And instead of allowing it to defeat you, or instead of figuring out that, you've got nothing to learn, you go forth and remain open and curious and take in those lessons and grow from it. We know the growth mindset is based on the work of Carol, whose last name
Yeah,
is
Decker or something. Yeah, I'm also missing on her last
Um,
name, Carol. Yeah,
anyways, the point
yeah,
being is that we know the difference between a fixed mindset and
yes,
a growth mindset. And
yeah.
I am very much of a growth mindset. I've been learning my entire life, and I will continue until I'm going out the door in the pine box. So there we are.
Wow, wow, amazing. Always learning, open and curious, right? And
Always. Yeah.
and you talk a lot about fearless factor, and I'm feeling curious here that how does the definition of growth mindset, which you just explained, relates to the fearless factor you talk about?
So when I talk about the fearless factor, and I ask people, what is your fearless factor?
Mm-hmm.
It's based on a philosophy that I've evolved over the years and through experience and so forth, that being fearless is not the absence of fear, but the courage to take the next step. Growth mindset is really all about the courage to take the next step. And when you
Mm-hmm.
take that next step, life becomes far more fulfilling, satisfying, and happy than it would be if you were not taking that next step. And that's frequently where people get stuck because they're not, reaching forward. And my tagline is be fearless, see where it gets you,
Wow.
because that is really fundamental to it. Be fearless, see where it gets you, because that's taking that next step, taking risks, being willing to stay open and curious, being willing to challenge yourself to move forward, because the whole thing about growth is that you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And when you're uncomfortable, you're in growth mode. If you're
Mm-hmm.
staying in your status quo comfort zone, nothing really changes, does it?
Mm.
And we'll go along to get along, as opposed to let's see exactly what my potential is, and really discovered that full potential, which many of the fixed mindset folks miss the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and they relate to each other, having that courage to take the next step. And I
Yeah,
also love your tagline: "Be fearless, see where it takes you."
yeah.
So,
I mean, that's really bottom line for me. Is
yeah,
my whole life has been spent, I would say, be fearless, see where it gets you. And not always without fear. In fact, many times with fear.
hmm,
Um, but at the same time, knowing that if I stand still, yeah, I'm playing small. I'm not going to achieve anything. I have three keywords that I apply to everything, which is learn, grow, and achieve. That's the story of life. And if we're not growing, we're actually dying because we're all organic beings.
Mm.
So as an
Yeah,
organic being, you must be in growth mode. Very
yeah,
simple.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned something about you ask tough questions. So I'm just relating this to, fearless is not absence of fear. It's having fear, but at the same time, gathering that courage to take the next step. And I'm relating it to the tough questions. I'm curious, Jacqueline, what is the most tough question, or rather, toughest question you have asked yourself?
Have I asked myself? Interesting. What are you most afraid of?
Mm.
That's really a big one, because most of
Yeah.
us are held back by something that we're afraid of, whether it's a fear of judgment, fear of
Mm.
failure, fear of rejection, fear of loss. That is a tough question for a lot of people because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't want to admit to their fears.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
asking myself that over and over and over again, it's like, where's that feeling in the pit of your stomach where you're going, "Oh, I don't know if I want to go there," or the internal critic who tells you you're not capable, you're not confident, you're not qualified, you're not. Um, you have to challenge that one by asking the tough questions about what's that about, you
Mm.
know, and why
Interesting.
would you want to continue in that role? So there's many variations of tough questions, and when I'm working
Mm.
with my clients, I
Mm.
tend to be rather direct with them when I listen to the stories that they tell themselves. And a lot of these stories are the stories I used to tell myself. And you have to challenge. And that's the tough questions. You have to challenge yourself to go, okay, so if you think that's your reality, what would it look like if it were different? What would it look like if you were to approach things, more openly? What would it look like if you really did achieve the things that you wanted to achieve? Um, for a lot of people, it's like I don't know. I have no idea. Okay, so let's use your imagination because a lot of the time, fear is imagination based. It's an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Attach a story to it. And when we attach that story is usually in the negative. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we create, reframe on that and go towards the positive?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Very interesting. So, we all know that fear limits our potential. And many times, as a coach, when I work with people, even, if I go back to my corporate journey when I was in corporate, not a coach, so many of us are not even aware that we are fearful. Kind of, we are wrapping the fear and hiding it in the closet. So have you come across these kind of people who are not aware of their fears? How do you make them understand their fears and kind of own them actually?
So one of the things about the fear in the workplace is that it is pretty much epidemic in the workplace for the most part, which
Mm-hmm.
means their heads down, they don't make decisions, they don't speak up, they walk around looking for approval on whatever it is. Or on the other side of things, they push back. They say no before they've even had a chance to figure out whatever it is that's going on. They fight for positions. Things are, we get into silos, so the competition piece is really high. People need to prove themselves. You see an awful lot of this type of behavior in the workplace, and I do behavioral assessments, 360
Yeah,
behavioral
yeah,
assessments.
yeah.
And I've seen over and over again that many of the behaviors that are operating in the workplace are fear based. And when people are confronted with, so what is, what's at base of this? So let's take, for instance, perfectionism. You see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who have high achievers, particularly who have perfectionist
Absolutely.
tendencies. So
Yeah.
things are never good enough when you're a perfectionist. So I always ask, and here's the hard questions, the hard truths, if you like. Where in yourself do you not feel like you're good enough? Now, that's a big question for a lot of people.
Yep.
And many people will say, I don't know.
I don't
I'll
know.
have to think about that.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when you really think about, the need to prove yourself, the need to have approval, the need to keep your head down and avoid any kind of conflict, what is that about for you? A lot of the time is because I don't think I'm capable of handling it. You know, fear ties into our thinking around our inability to handle whatever it is that comes our way. There's
Mhm.
a fear right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. And you brought it to very important topics of the organization culture, being perfectionist, avoiding conflict. All these, what I'm understanding from your answer is that has deep roots in being fearful.
Yeah, in my understanding,
Yeah.
in conversations and hundreds of conversations I've had over the
Yeah.
years with people in corporate America,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is, if I want to hold my job, or if I want to hold my position, or if I want to make an impact on my team, so much of it, like for instance, the difficult conversations, for instance, how
Mm-hmm.
many people avoid difficult conversations, the confrontations with another? And most of it is simply because they don't have the understanding, the tools, the insights they need in order to handle it effectively. Because
Mm-hmm.
nobody ever told you how to have a proper conversation, how to listen. Things we do as coaches, perfectly natural to us. But how do you listen more deeply? How do you frame questions so that you're actually engaging the other person and not just, in many instances in corporate America, telling people what to do? You know, how about you start asking questions? How about you start
Yeah.
digging into, how are you thinking about these things? What are you feeling around this? There's an empathy piece in here too, which is
Yeah.
another thing that's missing frequently. And self-compassion. Perfectionists don't have much self-compassion. I was talking to somebody yesterday who is high perfection, and he said, I am my own worst enemy. If I make a mistake, I hear the voices inside that berates me. If
Yeah.
I want to take a risk, I hear a voice inside me that tells me that's ridiculous. You'll never do that. Blah blah blah. So you question again that voice inside your head, because I like to say, where did that voice come from? You didn't put it there. Somebody else did. And it became, either an authority figure early in your life, or even a boss, or something that happened at school. But that voice, that critical voice, was planted at an early age, and it becomes your voice because you use it on yourself. And I call it the 2x4 syndrome, which is a piece of wood up the side of the head every time you get into that harsh judgment, critical sense of self. And I think that, becoming, you are your own worst enemy in that instance, but becoming your own best friend and showing some self-compassion is a big piece. And back to perfectionism again, I had a client who high perfection, and he had to learn how to have some self-compassion, which is, I didn't do so well today, but tomorrow I might do better. And I'm okay
Yeah.
with that. And go to bed
Yeah.
and go to sleep without worrying and overthinking about what I did, what I could have done better, blah, 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 so on and so forth. These are the things that as achievers, and especially high achievers, we're very, very capable of doing. And I say we because I used to do it too. So,
That's why I was laughing. I also did that. I'm sorry I got at you, but yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
share with you. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's pretty common, but as I said, part of my job is to teach you how to have some self-compassion.
Yeah, yeah. And I could relate to every word which you said, actually. I have been high achiever perfectionist at one point of time, not very long ago. So I can relate to everything what you said. So even when we talk about perfectionist and conflicts we were talking about, so when you're telling that, these are the questions to ask, you're asking these questions, somebody is understanding it. I've always seen the other side of it also, that people understand because people are very smart. They have high IQ. Most of the corporate people, so they understand, but they intellectualize it rather than embodying it. So how do you help them bridge that gap, especially from the fearless side?
So it's really about examination, isn't it? I mean, part of the growth mindset is the willingness to examine. And so if somebody says, yeah, 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 I get it, and it's all up in the head.
Yep.
Um, where do you, when you get uncomfortable, where do you feel it in your body?
Hmm.
Is it in your stomach? Does it show up in tense shoulders? Does it show up in headaches? Does it show up in constipation? People
Mm-hmm.
get constipated when they get
Yeah.
stressed.
Yeah.
When the stress shows up, as your hands hot and sweaty, are you just feeling that discomfort? For instance, your boss calls you in for a meeting and you automatically, because that's where your brain goes, says, what did I do wrong? As opposed to, you might actually be going in there for him to tell you did something right. But if you are someone who has that tendency to go, what did I do wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Like the disciplining parent that's coming into the head conversation,
Yeah.
but where in your body are you feeling it? So taking it out of your mind, because the mind is a tricky thing. We all know that, if you talk to people who do mindfulness and meditation and so forth, they'll talk about monkey mind. And
Yeah.
that monkey mind, if you've been around monkeys, and I'm pretty sure you have, they're crafty. They will come and they will steal from you. I mean, I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time in Bali, and we got a lot of monkeys there, and I don't trust them. So it's like, do you trust your mind, to do the right thing, to say the right thing, to think the
Yeah.
right thing? And you've got to train yourself into that. But that's the intellectual side. So on the physical side of things, it really is about feeling grounded,
Mm-hmm.
feeling like you're connecting to it, and being willing to feel that discomfort. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you're faced with the truths of who you are, sometimes we're coming to it with, well, if I find out who I really am, I'll find out that I'm really a worthless piece of whatever, you know, um, which of course is the lies that you tell yourself.
Yeah.
So be willing
Absolutely.
to sit with that discomfort and that feeling in the pit of your stomach that's like, I don't know if this is the right thing, but I'm going to go with it anyway. See what happens. Be fearless. See where it gets you.
Yeah. Where it takes you.
That makes
Right?
sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm kind of now shifting to the other side of the table. So if people become fearless at work, how can it help organizations?
There'll be more open conversations. There'll be more curiosity. There'll be more sharing of ideas without judgment. There'll be an ability to collaborate more effectively without feeling like somebody's stealing your thunder. There'll be more opportunities to break down the hierarchical structure because everybody's working to the same end, which is to build a company that makes money, period. That's it for most companies. But if you're building a culture that's fear-based culture where everybody keeps their head down and gets the job done and nobody really talks to each other, well, then
Yeah.
you've got a toxic environment. But
Yeah.
if you have an environment where people feel safe, and it's all about psychological safety, and I'm not the
Mm-hmm.
first one to talk about this, Amy Edmondson's book on the fearless organization is a perfect book for
Yeah.
those trying to figure out how to deal with fear in the workplace.
Yeah.
But the idea of psychological safety is that I feel confident to be able to say, that doesn't work for me, but let's explore other alternatives. Or
Yeah.
being able to speak up and not feel like my ideas are going to be shot down or they're going to be considered stupid. But
Yeah.
again, that comes from the individual. I like to say you've got to trust yourself before you can trust other people. So
Mm-hmm.
coming back to trusting yourself, trusting that I do have some good ideas, trusting that I do have something to say, trusting that I can give something and make a contribution to whatever the organization needs. That's taking ownership. That's the ownership of who I am and what I bring to this
Yeah.
organization. And for many people, they don't have that. So, what happens is, well, I'll just sit quietly and watch other people and see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
giving people permission to speak up, giving people permission to engage, and people to be able to talk to your boss like you're just a person. You're not just status. You're
Mm.
someone who wants to get a good job done. So how do we work together on this? How do we as a team come together? And as part of the work that I do, in fact, is working with teams to help them develop the communication skills, develop the ability and the confidence to be able to participate in the overall scheme of things in a positive, constructive way.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of it depends on the culture, right? And it has to be top down also. People have to mindfully decide that, we have to go fearless. We love going fearless. So that is the message, I guess, that has to come from the top.
There's no question that it starts at the top. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had conversations with CEOs who were all about me. It was all ego.
Yeah.
It's all about
Yeah.
me, and I'm the one who's running the organization, and blah blah blah. It's like they get cut off at the shoulders. They forget
Yes.
that the rest of the body of the organization is actually the ones that are running the machine,
Yeah. Yeah.
not the CEO. But when you're in that me conversation, which is an ego conversation, you forget that there's a we in here. And so what does
Yeah.
that we look like? And unfortunately, there are far too many toxic cultures out there
Yeah.
that are undermining the roles that people are trying to play. But it has to be from the top. There's a great book out there called An Everyone Culture, and
Yeah.
it's by Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy. And An Everyone Culture totally embraces the idea of this open,
Yeah.
expansive, curious
Yeah.
ability to engage wholly. And I took a program with them a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and it definitely speaks to the idea of creating a culture in our organization. And of course, the behavioral assessments I do is also about culture. It's about how do we help cultures to identify the problems and then think about how we want to address them. And people talk about getting fixed. Well, it's not
Yeah.
about fixing; it's about
Yeah.
growing and evolving into something better than what you got right now.
Yeah. And believing that actually you're growing and doing better, not doubting, rather believing in that.
The believing piece is a really big thing also, because if you
Yeah.
don't believe in yourself, which is kind of getting back to what I said earlier, if you don't believe in yourself,
Yeah.
if you don't trust yourself,
Absolutely.
then it's
Absolutely.
not going to work. So it
Yeah.
has to start at the individual level. And so, of course, we know that in many organizations, they have a lot of quick fixes, the band-aids. We'll give them this program and hopefully they'll get better. But what
Yeah.
they don't understand is that on an individual level, there's a lot of barriers that people have to get past. And they need accountability, and they need somebody to kind of hold up the mirror and go, you might want to look at this, as opposed to, here's some motivational stuff for you. Here's some rah, rah, rah. We'll give you some insights to where you're going to go. Well, the truth of the matter is that lasts about 5 minutes.
Wow.
So, let's get deep on this. And that's where my work comes in, is like,
Yeah.
I want to go deep. Like my last book, The Fearless Factor at Work, and both books, in fact, I see them as like virtual mentors because I ask a lot of questions, a lot of really deep dive questions, which is what I call it in The Fearless Factor at Work, deep dive questions, where you get to self reflect. Now, there's another piece that a lot of people don't take time for, is self reflection.
Yeah.
I don't have time for self reflection. Well, if you don't have time for self reflection, how do you expect to grow? It's very
Yeah.
simple. So
Absolutely.
asking these questions of yourself becomes critical to becoming more confident, taking ownership of who you are, and participating more fully in whatever life it is you've got going on.
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting conversation. So, as we are coming towards the end of our conversation, Jacqueline, I really enjoyed the conversation and really very, very helpful nuggets. So, how can people buy your books?
So both of my books are on Amazon. So
Hmm.
just look for The Fearless Factor or The Fearless Factor at Work on
Yeah.
Amazon. And you can also go to my website, which is jacquelinewales.com or the fearless factor at work.com. Either one gets you the same place, but there's a lot of information on there, and there's some online programs that will help with self-reflection. They'll help you understand a lot about your limited beliefs and how to communicate more effectively, as well as transitioning your career. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on there. And I would like to offer to your audience if a gift, which is if you go to the courses page on my website,
Mhm.
they can take the program that's called Reigniting Your Career for Success, and they can
Okay.
use the coupon code of JW21, and they will get it for free. And
Wow.
I'd be very happy to offer your audience that
Awesome.
particular gift.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I'll put all these details in the show notes so that people can access your books and access all the information which you just shared. And I'm sure, they'll be definitely very happy and privileged to go through this. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for this fearless conversation and great insights. I really
Thank,
appreciate your time.
thank you so much. I really appreciated being here. Thank you, Manbir.
And I'm sure people watching this conversation will be really, really curious and motivated to go fearless now. Thank you,
Excellent.
everyone. Thank you, everyone, for watching this video. And see you all again in the next video in this series, Growth Mindset Conversations. And do subscribe to this channel to watch more videos here to help you succeed in your journey. Thank you, and all the very best.